My boss stared at me like I'd just walked in from another world. As I stepped through the doorway, for 3 seconds, Marcus Wellington, the man who never hesitated, never second-guessed, simply froze. He knew his secretary. I've worked with him for 3 years. He just didn't recognize me anymore. I watched him tilt his head, trying to solve a puzzle he didn't yet understand he was looking at. By the end of that week, he'd tell the executive board I was the most valuable asset in his arsenal, his secret weapon, but standing there in that moment, I knew he was seeing someone completely new. What you didn't know was that 2 days earlier, I was about to be replaced. Before we dive in, please take a moment to subscribe. And if these stories resonate with you and you'd like to support the channel, you'll find my Buy Me a Coffee link on the About page. It's a simple way to show appreciation and help keep the Gender Diary growing. No pressure. Your presence here already means so much. Let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Andy Morrison, and for 3 years, I'd been the perfect employee. 27 years old, efficient to the core. I knew Marcus's schedule better than he did. I anticipated his needs before he voiced them. I understood his moods, his patterns, the way he took his coffee differently, depending on whether he had morning meetings or afternoon presentations. I was good at my job, excellent even, but somewhere along the way, excellent had stopped being enough. It started with small things. Marcus's responses to my emails grew shorter, more perfunctory. He stopped asking my opinion on scheduling conflicts. When I'd walk into his office with his daily briefing, he'd barely look up from his screen. The warmth that had once characterized our professional relationship had cooled into something clinical, distant. I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just stressed. The company was expanding, competition was fierce, and Marcus Wellington hadn't built a tech empire by being relaxed and accessible. Distance was natural. Then came the whispers. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, but I didn't understand why. Until the day I overheard the conversation that would change everything. I was in the supply room, a small space most people forgot existed. Marcus was on a call, his voice carrying through the thin walls with crystal clarity. "I need someone more polished," he was saying, "more adaptable. Someone who can represent the company at a higher level. Andy's capable, but there's something missing. A presence. A polish. I can't quite put my finger on it. I need someone who can command attention in a different way." The words hit me like physical blows. More polished, more adaptable, something missing. I stood there among the printer paper and toner cartridges, my hands shaking slightly as I processed what I'd just heard. This wasn't about my skills or my efficiency or my 3 years of flawless service. This was about something else entirely. Something about presence, about image, about the way I existed in professional spaces. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. 27 years old, average height, average build, average features. I wore the same rotation of conservative business casual, button-downs in muted colors, khakis or dark slacks, sensible shoes. I kept my hair neat and short. I blended into every corporate environment I entered. Safe, yet replaceable. But as I stared at my reflection, something else stared back. Something I'd kept carefully hidden for years, tucked away in the private corners of my life, where no one from work would ever see. I had always had a feminine side. It wasn't new, it wasn't sudden. It had been part of me for as long as I could remember. This comfort with softness, with grace, with the aesthetics and energy that society labeled feminine. In my private life, in my apartment, in the safety of my own company, I allowed myself to explore that side. To dress differently, to move differently, to simply be different. But I'd never brought it to work, never considered it professional, never thought it could coexist with my career. Until that moment, when my career was about to be taken from me anyway. A strange clarity settled over me as I sat there. Marcus wanted someone different, someone with presence, someone who could adapt and represent the company in a new way. What he didn't know was that I could be exactly that person. I'd spent years hiding parts of myself, convinced that showing them would end my career. But what if hiding them was what was ending it instead? If he wanted someone different, I'd show him everything I was. Every part of me I'd kept carefully compartmentalized. Every aspect of my personality I'd suppressed in the name of professional conformity. But I wouldn't ask for permission. I wouldn't explain or justify or prepare him. I would simply arrive as the person I'd always been capable of being and let my work speak for itself. The next morning, I woke up 2 hours earlier than usual. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady as I laid out everything I would need on my bed. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't panic. This was deliberate, calculated transformation. I started with a long shower, taking my time with exfoliation and moisturizing, steps I'd perfected in private but never applied with professional purpose. My skin needed to be flawless, smooth, ready to catch the morning light in ways my usual routine never considered. Standing in front of my full-length mirror in just a robe, I looked at the collection I'd assembled. The outfit I'd chosen wasn't provocative or inappropriate. It was powerful, professional, but undeniably, unapologetically feminine. I started with the foundation garments. Then came the sheer nude pantyhose, which I rolled carefully up each leg, making sure there were no runs, no imperfections. The material created a polished, almost luminous quality to my skin, catching light in a way that bare legs never could. The skirt came next, a high-waisted short plaid mini in neutral tones with a soft pleated structure. I stepped into it carefully, pulling it up and fastening it at my natural waist. The length was bold, but not inappropriate. It hit mid-thigh, professional enough for an office environment, but striking enough to command attention. Then came the top, a fitted long-sleeve beige blouse in a soft, luxurious fabric. I buttoned it carefully, then tucked it precisely into the skirt's waistband, making sure the lines were clean and sharp. I stood back and looked at the outfit. It worked. It was cohesive, polished, powerful. But I wasn't done. The shoes were next, and they were the statement piece. Bright red ankle-strap high-heeled pumps with a pointed toe and slim stiletto heel. When I stood fully upright in them, everything changed. My posture shifted. My walk would be different. My entire presence in a room would be transformed. The red was bold, intentional, a pop of color that said I wasn't hiding, wasn't apologizing, wasn't asking permission. Now came the most technically challenging part, the wig. I'd chosen a long, voluminous, medium brown wig with soft waves. The color was close enough to my natural shade that it could pass as my own hair grown out, but the length and style were completely different from the short, conservative cut I'd maintained at work. The transformation was already dramatic, but the real artistry came with makeup. I started with primer, creating a smooth canvas. Then foundation, carefully matched to my skin tone. Contouring came next. For my eyes, I kept it defined but not dramatic. A neutral brown shade across the lid, slightly darker in the crease for depth. Finally, lips. I lined them first with a neutral lip pencil, slightly overdrawing to create fuller shape. I stepped back and looked at myself in the mirror. The person staring back was me. Completely undeniably me. But also, someone Marcus Wellington had never seen. Someone polished. Someone present. Someone who commanded attention not through loudness or aggression, but through the quiet confidence of complete self-possession. I gathered my bag, my portfolio, my keys. My hands were still steady. My breathing was calm. I was ready. The drive to the office felt surreal. At every red light, I caught glimpses of myself in the rearview mirror. This version of me that was both familiar and completely new. I practiced my breathing, centered my thoughts, reminded myself of my capabilities and my worth. When I pulled into the parking garage, the morning sun was just starting to stream through the levels. I parked in my usual spot, gathered my things, and stepped out of the car. The click of my heels on the concrete echoed through the garage. That sound alone was different, sharper, more deliberate, announcing my presence with every step. I walked through the ground floor lobby, and I could feel the shift in energy. The security guard's greeting faltered mid-word. Two junior analysts who were getting coffee did literal double takes. A woman from marketing smiled at me with a look of appreciation and approval. I kept walking, my spine straight, my stride confident despite the heels. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless and instantaneous at the same time. When the doors opened, I stepped into the hallway that led to Marcus's office. Sarah from HR was at the reception desk and her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. Can I help you?" she asked, uncertainty in her voice. "Good morning, Sarah," I said calmly and kept walking toward my desk, the secretary's desk right outside Marcus's office. I heard her small gasp of recognition behind me, but I didn't turn around. My desk, my space. I'd occupied it for 3 years, but I'd never claimed it like this. I set my bag down, placed my portfolio neatly on the surface, and booted up my computer. Everything was familiar. The arrangement of my supplies, the position of my monitor, the stack of files that needed attention. But I was different. And that's when I felt it. The weight of attention, the sense of being watched. I looked up, and there he was. Marcus Wellington stood in the doorway of his office, one hand still on the doorframe, frozen mid-step. He'd clearly been about to exit his office for something when he'd noticed someone at the secretary's desk. But he hadn't expected this. His expression was remarkable in its transparency, confusion, shock, something that looked almost like awe. His eyes moved over me, not inappropriately, but with the intensity of someone trying to solve an impossible equation. His mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words came out. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other. I could see his mind working, trying to process what he was seeing. There was a beautiful, polished woman sitting at his secretary's desk, in his secretary's space, working on his secretary's computer with his secretary's files. But he didn't ask who I was. He didn't demand explanations or question my presence. He just stared, seemingly unable to move, caught in the moment of recognition that wasn't quite recognition. Some part of him knew me. The efficiency of my movements, the familiarity with the space, the confidence in my belonging there. But he couldn't reconcile that, knowing with what he was seeing. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," I said, my voice calm and professional. "Your 8:30 meeting with the product development team has been confirmed. The quarterly reports you requested are on your desk, and I flagged the sections that need your attention before the board meeting tomorrow." I watched the information register. These were details only his secretary would know. Said in a voice that was mine, but somehow different. Softer, more modulated, carrying a warmth that had never been part of my professional presentation before. His hand slowly dropped from the doorframe. He blinked, seemed to shake himself slightly, but still didn't speak. "Is there anything you need before your first meeting?" I asked, maintaining perfect professional courtesy. He started, then stopped, cleared his throat. "No, thank you. Everything seems to be in order." But he didn't move. He just kept looking at me with this expression of stunned fascination, like he was seeing something miraculous and impossible at the same time. Finally, he seemed to gather himself enough to step back into his office, though he cast one more look over his shoulder before disappearing behind the door. I turned back to my computer, my heart racing but my hands perfectly steady. The game had begun. Every gesture felt amplified, visible, significant. And Marcus noticed everything. He didn't participate in the speculation. He didn't explain or clarify. He just watched me with this look of complete captivation, as if I was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered. The rest of the afternoon passed in similar fashion. Marcus increasingly reliant on me, increasingly impressed, and increasingly confused by the sense of familiarity he couldn't quite place. By the time 5 o'clock approached, I had successfully navigated an entire day of being completely myself in a professional environment that had never seen this version of me. And Marcus Wellington had spent the entire day captivated, impressed, and unable to look away. I prepared to leave for the day. Gathering my things and shutting down my computer, Marcus emerged from his office. But still, he didn't quite grasp it. "Have a good evening," I said, picking up my bag. "You too," he replied, and I could feel his eyes on me as I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of him standing there, watching me leave, completely mesmerized by someone he thought he didn't know. That night, I sat in my apartment feeling both exhilarated and terrified. I'd done it. I'd shown up as my complete self, and not only had I not been fired or rejected, I'd been praised, valued, appreciated in ways I'd never experienced before in that office. But I'd also created an impossible situation. How long could I maintain this? How long before the truth became undeniable? Part of me wanted to pull back, to show up the next day in my old clothes, my old presentation, and let things return to what they'd been. But a stronger part of me knew that was impossible. I'd felt something in that office today. Power. Presence. The complete integration of all the parts of myself I'd been keeping separate. And I couldn't go back to being partial, hidden, diminished. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it completely. The next morning, I chose an outfit that was bolder, more striking, impossible to ignore. This wasn't about blending professional and feminine. This was about commanding attention and respect simultaneously. I began my morning routine earlier than the day before, knowing this transformation would take more time, more precision. I started with the foundation garments again, but this time I added subtle padding in strategic places to enhance the silhouette I wanted. Then came the outfit itself. The dress was stunning, a black-fitted mini dress made of faux leather material that hugged every curve. It was sleeveless, with a square neckline that was professional but striking. The material had a subtle sheen that caught light beautifully, giving it a high-fashion edge, while still being appropriate for a progressive office environment. Over it, I added a black crop jacket covered entirely in shimmering sequins. The jacket was long-sleeved, hitting just at my natural waist, and every movement made the sequins catch the light in a cascade of sparkle. The combination was striking. Then came the boots, and they were showstoppers. Black thigh-high heeled boots made of smooth leather, with a pointed toe and slim stiletto heel, zipping it up past my knee all the way up to mid-thigh. The fit was perfect. Now for the wig. Today's choice was completely different from yesterday. A long blonde wig with darker roots, creating a dimensional, natural effect. The hair was straight with slight natural waves, falling well past my shoulders. The blonde was a cool, sophisticated shade, not brassy or artificial looking. For the makeup, I started with the same foundation routine. Primer, foundation, concealer. But this time I went deeper with the contouring. Sharper lines beneath my cheekbones, more definition along my jawline, creating dramatic shadow and light that would look striking in person and powerful in any professional setting. For my eyes, I went with a smoky effect. Darker shades in the crease, building up intensity gradually. For my lips, I chose a deeper rose color, almost a nude mauve, lined carefully for definition, then filled with a matte liquid lipstick that would last all day. I stepped back from the mirror and took in the complete picture. This wasn't just feminine, this wasn't just professional, this was powerful. This was someone who walked into rooms and changed the energy completely. Someone who commanded attention not by asking for it, but by simply existing with complete confidence. I gathered my things, my bag, my portfolio, my phone, and I noticed my hands were steadier than yesterday. The nervousness was gone, replaced by certainty. The drive to the office felt different this time. Yesterday had been about proving something. Today was about owning it. I walked through the parking garage, my heels clicking on concrete. With each step, I felt like I was walking onto a stage where I'd already proven I belonged. Onto the executive floor, the reaction was immediate. Sarah from HR stood up from her desk, her mouth literally falling open. Oh my God. She breathed, and I wasn't sure if she'd meant to say it out loud. I smiled at her warmly. Good morning, Sarah. You look incredible, she managed. I settled at my desk, booting up my computer, reviewing Marcus's schedule for the day. Everything was normal, routine, except for the fact that I was wearing a sequin jacket and thigh-high boots while doing it. That's when I sensed him. I looked up, and there was Marcus Wellington, standing in the doorway of his office, and his expression was completely different from yesterday. Yesterday had been confusion, surprise, inability to process. Today was pure, undisguised fascination. He wasn't trying to hide his reaction. His eyes moved over me slowly, taking in every detail of the outfit, the hair, the makeup, the boots. Not in a way that felt inappropriate or objectifying, but in a way that suggested he was seeing something he'd never encountered before. Something that challenged every assumption he'd had about professional presentation. He gestured toward me, encompassing the entire image I presented. He stood there for another long moment, then finally retreated back into his office, shaking his head slightly. Throughout the day, the dynamic was completely different than it had been yesterday. Marcus wasn't distant or formal. He was engaged, attentive, and increasingly reliant on my input. But more than that, he seemed unable to function without constantly checking where I was, what I was doing, whether I was nearby. The afternoon brought an unexpected development. Marcus called me into his office around 3 o'clock and asked me to close the door behind me. My heart rate increased slightly. This felt like a moment of reckoning. Sit down, please, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I sat, crossing my ankles elegantly, my posture perfect, my expression calm. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Of course, Mr. Wellington. Are you, he paused, choosing his words carefully, are you the same person who's been sitting at that desk for the past 2 days? The question surprised me. What do you mean? I mean, yesterday you were wearing a beige outfit with brunette hair. Today you're blonde with a completely different style. Are you the same person? Or are you? He trailed off, as if realizing how absurd the question sounded. I'm the same person, I confirmed. Same skills, same loyalty, same mind, just different expression. He nodded slowly. Range. That's an interesting way to put it. He leaned forward, his elbows on his desk. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus stared at me, his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like fear, not of me, but of what understanding would mean. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he said something that surprised me. Tell me about this side of you. Help me understand. I sat down across from him, feeling the weight of the moment. I've always had a feminine side, I began, for as long as I can remember. It's not a costume or a character. It's part of my identity, part of how I experience the world. In my private life, I've always allowed myself to explore this. The aesthetics, the presentation, the energy of femininity. But I kept it completely separate from my professional life. I leaned forward slightly. So I made a choice. I decided to show up as my complete self and let my work prove its value. And for the past 2 days, that's exactly what I've done. Same skills, same capabilities, same knowledge of you in this office. Just fully expressed. Marcus nodded slowly, and I could see him reorganizing his entire understanding of the past 2 days. He turned back to face me. He walked back to his desk, but didn't sit down. Instead, he leaned against it, arms crossed, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something like respect, mixed with regret, mixed with genuine admiration. "Andy," he said, and hearing my name in his voice carried a different weight now. "I owe you an apology." "You don't," I started, but he held up a hand. He pushed off from the desk and began pacing, energy building in his movement. He stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "So what now?" I asked. He smiled, a real, warm smile that reached his eyes. "We move forward. We make this official. You continue being exactly who you are, and I continue learning to be a better leader because of what you've taught me." I smiled, a real, genuine smile. As I turned to leave his office, he called after me. "Andy?" I turned back. "Yes?" "For what it's worth," he said, his voice sincere. "You were right about the arsenal comment. You are my secret weapon, not despite who you are, but precisely because of it. Your adaptability, your presence, your ability to navigate different contexts with confidence, that's invaluable. That's what makes you irreplaceable." "Thank you," I said quietly. The weeks following that conversation brought changes that rippled far beyond just my relationship with my boss. 6 months after that first morning when I walked into the office transformed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. I was sitting at my desk, though it was hardly just a secretary's desk anymore. It was a strategic command center, when Marcus emerged from his office for a rare moment of downtime. I thought about the transformation, not just the physical one of clothes and makeup and presentation, but the internal one of integration, of wholeness, of trusting my own value. And I realized something profound. The thing I'd been most afraid to show, my femininity, my flexibility, my refusal to fit into rigid categories, wasn't a liability. It was an asset. It was exactly what made me valuable, not despite who I am, but because of it. Because staying invisible, staying partial, staying safe, that's its own kind of loss. It's the slow erosion of self, the gradual diminishment of capability, the quiet tragedy of never knowing what we might have been if we'd been brave enough to be complete. I'd taken the risk, and I'd won. Not just my job, not just Marcus's respect, but something far more valuable, myself, my whole, complete, integrated self. And that was worth everything. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if there are parts of you that you keep hidden, compartmentalized, locked away because you've been taught they don't belong in certain spaces, I want you to know something. You're not alone. And you're not wrong. If this story resonated with you, if you've had your own journey of becoming whole, or if you're still working up the courage to take that first step, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Share your story. Let's create a community of people who choose authenticity over conformity, wholeness over safety. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. Because there are more stories to tell, more truths to share, more courage to build together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay true, stay whole, stay irreplaceable. The end.
The Gender Diary exists to light that path with shared stories. Whether you found connection in this narrative, you're on your own journey of gender exploration, or you're here seeking understanding, your subscription fuels our mission. Every subscriber empowers us to keep illuminating these authentic experiences for our community. Kindly drop a comment below. Your voice adds to the tapestry of experiences that makes this space meaningful. Until our next story unfolds.